Give you tips from a judge, and that judge is me. Over the years, I have judged many, 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 many reading fairs. I've seen every mistake you can make. I've seen what wins. I've seen what doesn't. So I want to give you some tips that will hopefully help you create the best project, or help your student create the best project that you can. And I keep saying you, but the video is for the parents, but it's to help your students, to help your children. So you will notice that I do not have the Mississippi Reading Fair guidelines here, because these are my tips and they are my own opinion from judging, and they are not endorsed by the Mississippi Reading Fair or the Mississippi Department of Education. It's just tips that I feel are relevant to share with you. So I will also say that, and let me be clear, I do not judge my reading fair. I judge other reading fairs. So no coordinator judges their own fair, but I have judged many fairs at many different schools. And this is true. We often remark that if a different panel of judges were to judge the same fair, they would likely have completely different results. Of course, I mean in the placing, who they would choose for first, second, and third, not necessarily, there's usually consensus about which projects would place and which would not stand a chance, just because of missing things or quality or design or whatever. But when we look at those, the top ones, different judges go through, they may choose a different way. So it's not all, but it is a little subjective. Okay, so about the boards. Color is my first tip. You can definitely win with a completely white backboard, but it has to be really dressed up. In the fiction module, I showed the hermit crab. That's a great project on a whiteboard. But you did notice it had a lot of painting and things like that on it. The second alternative is to buy a board that already comes with a certain color. The only downside to that is you can be limited to which colors are available. But I will say that when I've stood back and looked at all the winners of past fairs, typically the boards that are all one solid color, I mean, I'm not saying you can't have tricolor or anything. I mean, you can have different colors, but the ones that have a lot of color really stand out to the judges, especially when there's a lot of good complementary color choices for different elements and things like that. I'm not saying don't use white. You can spray paint a whiteboard. Don't use any water-based paints because it will warp the board. You can even take adhesive spray and do colored paper on it. If you do have a whiteboard though, I would definitely suggest borders. And one way you can also do that with just with every element, if your element is on white paper, do not glue white paper onto a whiteboard. But if you have a colored construction paper, square of construction paper that sticks out a little bit from the white, it gives it a nice border around it. So I've even seen people do double and triple borders where it makes, kind of like a 3D effect, really popping out. And that's not expensive to do. So it's just a way to make it a little bit more attractive. I like to see inventive use of materials. I said that in the nonfiction one with the recycling project. If you know that you're doing fiction or nonfiction and you didn't watch the other video, I still would suggest that you go back to those and look at the slides where I show project examples. I also have a couple of really good ones in the library. I have a fiction and a nonfiction. If you want to come look at those, you're more than welcome. So yeah, an example, I had a student that did Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and he had paper plates for all of his elements. When my daughter was in school, we did something Christmas pageant, worst Christmas pageant ever, and it was a family project, but we made all of the elements. We took white paper, but behind that I took wrapping paper and kind of folded it over the edges, and we used gift tags for her different elements to make them look like Christmas presents. So that was one way. She made cute little model like out of clay that got destroyed. And her project, I was told later, they wanted to win first place, but it had something that stuck up just a little bit above the top of the board, and they disqualified it. So she did win something, but it wasn't first place. And I did, I think, say this in both of the videos, but personally I prefer for the title to just be displayed and the author as well. And there's, I think pretty much every project that I have as examples did it that way. And that's typically what you see. But don't think, you don't have to be limited by all the big stuff in the middle of the board. I've seen, where the students start on all the way on the left side and just go across and, make it different. And those kind of things will help it stand out to the judges. Okay, about student work being evident. If we as judges have to start looking to see if maybe a child cut that out, maybe a kid colored that part right there, student work is not evident. If we're having to search for it like that, then I don't know what to tell you, but, it's probably going to get marked down. If not, if we're not really sure, we think, but we're not sure, we probably won't take 10 points, but we might, where it says that it's age appropriate, we might do something there. For older students, handwriting the elements is a good way to do this, but it's not required at any level. They do not have to handwrite it. But I'm just letting you know as a judge, that is a clear evidence that the student worked on the project. So the other issue, if you store by all the items, like all of the, you use pre-done letters and borders and pictures or whatever, and the information is typed, very hard to see if the student actually did the work. And really, and sometimes we kind of base it on their age level because, students can type, but when we see they're using transitional phrases and things like that really well when that's not typical for that age, it's kind of obvious that they had a lot of help with editing. So when we really can't, everything's store-bought and put together that way, it's very hard to determine that. So sometimes you may have a project that looks amazing and you're like, why did that one not win? Well, it's because it lost 10 points because we couldn't see that student work was evident. So it marked it down a lot. And this is also, it has to be evident in the family projects. And they are also judged with groups which have no adult assistance. So, of course, kindergarten and first grade, I believe it's specifically stated in the guidelines that they can have a little bit more assistance from adults with different things. But again, if they're entering as an individual, and I usually, if it's just one student on the project, and the parents, a lot of times parents feel like they assisted more than they actually did. And so they have a tendency to want to put something in family. And sometimes I make a judgment call and I will say, no, this shouldn't go in family, because if you have a project that really looks more like an individual student did it and you put it in family, it doesn't have a chance. But if you take that project and put it with the individual category, it does. So that's just kind of, I don't know. Now, if two siblings are listed, we have to put it in family. So those are my tips about it's a hard, and some judges are really tough on student work being evident. So of course, if you have more questions about that, I can definitely help you out with that. Just know that student work being evident does not determine whether it should be an individual or family, because even in family, they have to have it. But if it's individual, then it should really be clear. And like I said, that's my opinion that handwriting is good at the lower level, but it's not required and you do not have to have it handwritten. So just know that too. Okay, these are things I'm picky about. All judges have their things they're picky about. And of course, mine don't really apply to my students because I won't be judging their projects, but I've had other reading fair coordinators tell me similar things. So In categories above third grade, I like to see all the elements other than the book information, which is the title, author, and publisher, presented in complete sentences. So the main characters are, and list them. I mean, it's that simple, but you have a complete sentence and it makes your project look better. There's certain places where, although they've taken away like the tone and mood and the other things, there are some areas like main character and author's purpose were usually places where we would see just one-word answers. But I will be honest, I probably under clarity of writing or something take points if I don't see complete sentences in third and up. So, and I said categories above third. I meant including third grade. So, yeah, it can be marked down in clarity of writing or thoroughness of written information, depending on how that's stated in the rubric. And photocopying. This used to not be written out on the rubric that it wasn't allowed, but it is now. You cannot photocopy pages from the book. You cannot print things off the internet and stick them on the board. If you purchase something that is like, birthday supplies or something that goes along, like Harry Potter's one that sticks out in my head, you could probably find like at Party City. You can have purchased items on the board. That's not, you're buying them for your use, so that's a way that you can use them. But you cannot copy things from the book, and you cannot just have pictures of the characters that you printed online, even if the students colored them. That just really shouldn't be there. And of course, it's because it's a form of plagiarism, and we're trying to teach our students not to do that. And just my little add in there as a librarian, Mississippi State, which kind of hosts our whole Magnolia database that students can use even from home. But they reported that 50%, maybe a little over 50% of students in college that are referred for any kind of discipline issue are referred for academic dishonesty, which is plagiarism, copying things. So we've got to start really young teaching them that they cannot do that. So that's my piece about it, so I will move on. Common mistakes. In the informational nonfiction, the common mistake is forgetting the graphic organizer or using fiction elements on the project. Cannot do that. So make sure if you're doing info nonfiction, you should have the one that says text summary and not plot summary. It also says at the top of the checklist what you should have, and all of that is in the student information packet that you can download here, or you can print. You can get a copy in the library. Forgetting elements in any category. Check your project against the rubric before you turn it in. I believe for both projects, the total number of elements is 8, and that includes title, author, publisher, your summary, and then the extra included elements. Because it used to be 10 for each one, but then they removed 2 elements. Of course, that only applies K through 8. If you are high school level, you also have an additional element for each type of project, fiction or nonfiction. Let's see. Oh, things that go over the top of the top. Things that go over the top or over the sides or beyond the sides. I've not been overly picky if something's small, like a little tiny bit of the border is over the thing. However, there are other judges in other places, when it moves on to the next round, I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know how strictly they would be with those things. The best rule to follow is make sure everything fits inside the borders of the board. Don't let anything stick out, not a piece of paper, not a star, not a bow, which was the problem with my daughters, even though I pushed it down. So make sure that those things are not sticking out anywhere. You cannot have a header, like science fair header. Cannot have those on the board. I'm not sure why they're so picky about it, but they are. So, and finally, displaying the book or not. And I know that says no, but I don't usually, I'm occasionally asked this question. Usually they just decide and do it or not. This is my experience with it. If it's a library book, don't put it out there because I'm going to come by and I'm going to take it up because I've had books get lost and damaged during the reading fair. Then the student has to pay for that book. So if I see library books barcoded out there, I mean, for my library, I'm not going to go take your book from Harrison County libraries, but if I see a book that's from the library, I will take it up and check it in because it's just not worth the risk of having it damaged or lost or stolen. Okay, so a pro for displaying the book is that if the child has really tried to match their artwork to something in the book, or there's something that judges aren't really clear about, if it's a shorter book, they can pick it up and kind of look at it and say, okay, that I get it, or I get the artwork, or whatever. However, I once found a project. It had a really short book, like a short picture book, and I was looking at it, but I was like, something about this doesn't make sense. Like, this doesn't seem to follow. And when I read all of the elements and then quickly read the book, I realized that they were not getting the concept and everything was wrong on the board. They did not have the correct conflict or resolution or anything. And because I knew that, because I had the book, they didn't, it was definitely one I was looking at. Otherwise, I wouldn't have taken the time to read the story. So it can have side effects if you have not, if the student hasn't really portrayed the book in the way that it should be portrayed, or they may make judgments about like how, you open it up to where the judge can now look inside the book and see if you got it all or if you're missing something. And really they shouldn't do that. I mean, because another pro would be, the information that's on the board is not enough for them to make a decision about how they feel about thoroughness and all that kind of stuff. And then they read the book and they're like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it now. And then they score more high. So that's kind of like an unfair advantage, but at the same time, it can be a disadvantage because if you don't really portray it, then it's absolutely not required though. So you don't have to have it. It's a matter of choice unless it's a library book. So these are really the best tips I can give you. I would say the biggest thing is when you create that project and stand back from it, does it make your student, looking at their work, do they want to go over and see more about it? Or ask, have somebody else look at it and say, oh, my computer just made some really crazy noises. Anyway, just see if, outsiders would look at it and say, yes, that I'm drawn to that one. Because usually what happens, the way I go through and judge is I walk through the whole category and I just have those ones that you just get drawn to and you're like, okay, and you really focus on those. And then, you still judge and look at the ones that, are not as attractive, but when you look at those, you already know that the scores for these things are going to be lower because of the way it looks. Whereas the really attractive ones, that if all of the elements are good, that's going to be great. And I will say judges will use everything at their disposal. I allow my judges to have students come and explain things if they need to, because we've had cases where the student came up, talked to the judge and said, oh, my mom did the whole thing. I don't know anything about it. And that was somebody they were looking at for first place. And then, speak to another student that, okay, this is my second choice. And the student can tell them all about the story and everything. That doesn't happen very often. But I was judging a fair last year and I was reading the elements and I was like, the project looked great. It was an older student, so no question about whether they could do the artwork or not. But when I was reading the summary, I was like, this sounds like something that, like, if this is actually written by this child, they have a great career in advertising or copywriting or whatever, because it just sounded amazing. And so I kind of asked the reading fair coordinator, and we ended up getting on a computer, and I typed in a little bit of their summary, and it popped up on Amazon because it was the copy for the Amazon description of the book. So please make sure that you stress to your child that they must use their own words. We can tell when it's plagiarized. It just doesn't sound like something coming from a child. So those are my biggest tips, again, with the color and design, just making it look really appealing. You don't want to have clashing colors, and there's lots of resources online for colors and things like that. Wouldn't spend a ton of time on it because usually you can just tell by looking, but yeah, those are my best tips. And again, I'm probably going to do an FAQ video, so if you have a question, you can email me and I will definitely respond directly to you, but then I will probably make a follow-up video if I can, going over some of those questions. I know it's a little bit more difficult this year with having so many changes and additions, and I don't even know what it's going to be like to get the whole fair set up, but still looking forward to it and seeing what everybody comes up with. So I just encourage you to, support your child and have a good time with them while they're creating their reading fair project this year.